All right, good evening again, everyone. Welcome to Play Math and Digital Tools with Tina Zita. Tonight's OTF Connect session, and I know I'm looking forward to it, and I know all of you are. So welcome. We had a full house here. We had this one was pretty much sold out. I was looking at the registration as I was sort of going through the attendance, and this was a sort of a sold out one. So there's a lot of excitement in this. So it's really cool to see everybody here this evening. So. This is always, there we go. Just always cool to see everybody from all around Ontario getting together and learning on an evening. So, thanks for taking some time and welcome once again. I'm going to zip here to Tina's first slide, and I'm going to pass it on to Tina, and you can take it away. And just let me know whatever you need, Tina, and I will do my best to help you.
Alrighty, so good night. Super excited to be online with each of you guys, and hopefully we can live up to some of the hype. This is definitely a cool topic, and we're looking forward to exploring it. So just a little bit about myself. It's awesome to see some names I recognize in the feed. My name's Tina Zita, and I'm an instructional technology resource teacher with Peel District School Board, which really means I have one of the coolest jobs out there. I get to play with tech and help kids and teachers figure out how to use the technology for learning. So super cool job everywhere from kindergarten to grade 12. But in my past life, I was both a grade 1 and grade 2 teacher as well as an early literacy coach. So I love the early years, and that's how we kind of stumbled out tonight. So feel free to connect. We'll put the information on later as well. If you want to connect on social media during, before, after, anything like that, we'll have that back up in a little bit. But we want to know a bit about you, just who we have in the group. So in the chat window, if you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself, if you have one of those fancy emoji keyboards and you have an emoji that captured your day, feel free, and we'll just take a few minutes to do that. Glad to have you with us, Tricia. And Brenda and Marianne. And Ashley, even though the ideas are the early years, we've used them with across the grade levels, really, which is awesome. Seeing a lot of grade 1, which is cool. Caitlin, you teach grade 1, 2, and 3 all together? Hey, Wendy, nice to see you. I can't keep up with all of you wonderful folks adding it in there. And Deb and I got to chat this morning, so she gets a full day of early years conversations. So thank you guys so much. Keep adding your introductions as we go along. It's awesome to see such a variety of folks joining in, and I'm sure all of your experiences are going to add to our conversations. It's a pretty fluid conversation, so feel free at any time to drop your questions in the chat window, or like Colin said, just raise your hand so we know to pause. We'll also take some time as we go through the presentation just to check in. Because I know in a webinar it's not as intuitive as that back and forth that we may have in a face-to-face conversation. We did want to do a quick little vote, just like you guys did a minute ago, just so we can kind of see those that division. So you see you have a couple options there for voting. So A is for kindergarten, B if you're teaching grade 1, C if you're teaching grade 2, and D if it's any other marvelousness, whether it's one of those fancy combinations or something like that. So with the vote, you should be able to click right from your drop-down menu there. So you see your emoji the away button, a hand, and then a little letter. So if you click there, it will go right to our collection. So we're seeing we have some kindergarten folks. It looks like a lot of grade 1 folks. A lot of other marvelousness, which is awesome. So we have a nice variety across the grade levels, which is fantastic. Cool. And we do have another voting question, if that's okay. So for this one, we just want to make sure we spend more time on the tools that you kind of have access to. So again, where that letter is, right under the participant name. A, if you have iPads, or any other, if you have Android tablets that you have access to. B, if it's mostly desktop computers. C, if you're using a lot of Chromebooks. Or D, if it's a combination, and I know that's usually kind of the scenario. So thank you for that. It looks like a lot of combinations right now, which is cool. A lot of what we're looking at today is app-based. Some of it's Android and Apple. But we'll also talk about some of the online options, because it seems we do have a few folks that have mainly desktop computers, or that combination piece. Alrighty. So let's see our next question. This one's a little different. So as we talk about games tonight, we wanted to just see what games you're already using to engage students in that math and play conversation. So whether it's I actually named the orange circle before old school, and it just seemed wrong. So whether it is something more traditional that you use without any technology, feel free to add that into the orange circle, just using your text tool with the tall, long gray toolbar you have along the left-hand side of the slide, or if there's a digital game you use right now. So one of my favorites, for example, I'm just going to click on the text, and then I can make my box here. And it doesn't want to do it for me, go figure. One of the digital tools I use a lot is called the TVO Kids Games. Oh, and my text is just not cooperating. So hopefully yours is. Feel free to use the chat window if it isn't. And we'll give you a few seconds to do that. More like minutes, sorry. No rush. So I'm loving the dice games. I know I was talking to my friend as she's working with her daughter around some of those numeracy facts, and we were talking about just the benefit and power of card games. Thanks, whoever added that one in. Just that it brings that fun and that play and that exploration in. Awesome to see Empower on the list. I know it's a new tool that TVO has released, and I believe they have everything released right now from kindergarten to grade 6, which is awesome, and a variety of strands, which is cool. We often see that with number sense, enumeration, but often missing that in some of the other areas. Oh, I love that, Brenda. Giving them as holiday gifts. That's awesome. Love that Codable was mentioned, as that's something we're going to talk about tonight, coding as one of those options. And just if you have another idea, we'll just give you another minute or so before we move on to our next page. And Prodigy is definitely another great tool to have accessible to us, especially for free. I love Tigly, and I didn't think to put it in tonight. Tigly is one of those things that I've gotten to play with a few times, but I don't have my own set, which I need to work on. All right. So, and this is really why we wanted to put this slide in. There's so many great ideas of how people are using games and math and digital tools together. So as we explore tonight, you may have some ideas that you've tried, some experiences. Feel free to add those to our conversation, and we can kind of build on that. All right, so we're going to move on to the next slide, if that's okay. So tonight, one of the hard parts is that there's so many ways that we can bring play, math, and digital tools together. So tonight we're going to look at a few ideas and kind of tackle each one for a few minutes. So one of those ideas really is those quick games. And I think one of the hardest parts when we come to looking for games or apps is that if you search numbers in the App Store, you probably get 1,000 hits. And how do we know which tools are a great tool to start with? And I kind of have a few of my go-tos, so I thought I'd share them as we get started. The one we see on the left is Frantic Find. And one of the reasons I love all of the TVO Kids apps is just because they're device neutral. So a lot of times as we explore apps, we have an iPad that's great, but then our students may have a Samsung tablet. Others may be checking them out online. So how can we find tools that really we could start with in the classroom, but then continue at home? So Frantic Find is one of those that belongs to TVO Kids, and all TVO Kids apps are available for both Android and Apple, and the majority of them are also available online. So a great opportunity to continue to explore them. One of the reasons I love an app like Frantic Find, I don't know if anybody's checked it out before. Where the emojis are, you can give me a little thumbs up if you have checked it out. One of the hardest parts with apps or games is that it's hard to combat that image of a child in a game and just that one-to-one concept, and that there's no conversation or interaction happening. So one of the cool things about Frantic Find is you can actually play with up to 4 people at a time, and you have the opportunity to adjust the game to your knowledge level or understanding. I've played it with my friends' kids, and they are just absolutely in love with Frantic Find. It gets a little competitive, just a tad, but a great app to have in your repertoire. Another collection of apps, and the example we have here is called Moose Math. One of the reasons I love Moose Math is just that Moose Math is, it looks at a variety of strands, which I like that it doesn't just look at one area of mathematics. The other piece is that you can actually have several different users on one device. Again, Apple and Android. So it really facilitates that interaction. All of the Duck Moose apps, which Moose Math is a part of, used to cost just under $5, but Khan Academy actually funded them recently, and they're all available for free. So if you ever check out Duck Moose in your app store, you're going to get a collection of about 20 or 30 different apps. They vary in their challenge level or their use, but definitely an opportunity to explore and engage. And as Wendy mentioned, Clarity Innovations is a great little resource. They create virtual manipulatives for a variety of different formats. So the one you see on the screen, which is one of my favorites for starting off, is the pattern shapes. You can both do the patterns, as you can see there, as well as, we'll just bring this over here. So you can see over here that they have some of those templates you can use, but you also can just do your freeform. Along the bottom, you can see you can actually bring in a protractor as well as labeling some of your different shapes. Just an awesome little tool, but one of the pieces that's so amazing about Clarity Innovations is it's both a free app, but also available as an HTML widget, which means you can use them on your smartboard or use them on your classroom computer. So again, another quick little tool that we can add to our repertoire. But to me, the question that I've really been tackling with for the last little bit has been that idea of how we can really bring digital tools into that creativity piece. So just to explain a little bit more, I think of something like when kids go outside and they find that ant, and it just sparks so many questions and inquiries that you can't control all of the questions that are kind of coming to their mind. Same when you build that really cool construction tower that they're so proud of, or they've discovered a new skill. And to me, the idea that I've been tackling when it comes to the early years play and digital tools is how can I get to that same state of inquiry, that state where the questions are just abounding. And I think there's been a couple ways that I've seen digital tools fit into that flow. And the first one that we want to check out is really just that idea of documenting. So sometimes digital tools don't need to be the main stage of the experience. Sometimes they can play that supporting role. And I think one of the hardest parts when we look at all of this wonderful play we have in our early years programs, especially with open materials, is just how do we capture that learning that's happening? How can we also build that independence in for students so that they can be building and documenting themselves? So one of my favorite tools, or quick tools, is an app called Shadow Puppet. Has anybody used Shadow Puppet before? Just a thumbs up again if you have. So Shadow Puppet, I'll just go over it. Oh, awesome. So Shadow Puppet's a quick, simple app that allows you to take pictures, kind of like you see over here. You just take pictures from your camera roll. Once you have the pictures you want, whether it's one picture or 5 pictures, you push your record button, and then students are able to talk about what they see on the screen. That in itself is just super awesome, and it's very limited to the amount of possibilities. So even though we could do this in an app like Educreations or Explain Everything, sometimes we just want to get straight into that documentation piece. The other thing we have is we have a pointer. I keep calling this the magic pointer to kids, and they keep asking me where's the magic, so I need to stop that. But you have these little pointers, so as they're recording, they can actually illustrate what they're talking about on the actual page itself, which is just such an awesome possibility for capturing that conversation. This was a friend that was building, and we started off with 2, and then we challenged him to see if he could make a tower of 10, and just being able to document that conversation.
Tina?
But
I'm just going to interrupt whenever I see a question. Ashley asked a question in the chat wondering about a time limit for recording.
Oh.
Is there a time limit for the recording?
Oh. Sorry, I missed Ashley's question. Thanks.
No, that's fine. That's what I'm here for.
There isn't a time limit for recording. That being said, I've never gone over 5 minutes, but there isn't a time limit per se. We've even sometimes used it as a way to record the conversation between the teacher and the student, so we can kind of have it side by side. We've had kids in grade 1, even in October, using Shadow Puppet in pairs, independently from the teacher. In kindergarten, a few friends have been able to tackle it. It's always harder with the JKs and SKs because you find some kids are really great with the tech and others aren't as familiar with it. But I've had some small groups make their own stories without my help. It's always a little crushing when I think I'm going to teach them something and they just take the iPad and do it. I think that's the benefit of something like Shadow Puppet, because the interface is so simple. It's a bit easier for kids to just jump in, especially when you're just taking pictures from the camera roll. Shadow Puppet does have the opportunity for you to pull in pictures from other places, so we've done that as well. So if you were doing it for communities, taking a picture of your community and then talking about the route you would take and using that positional language in math, something like that would be a bit trickier, but we've done that with grade 1 as well. Hopefully we've answered your questions about that one. There's another one that I would bring into documenting. I feel like I'm kind of cheating because I just love this app so much. This one is one of those fun little apps. And Colin, I think, do we want to try the YouTube piece?
Yeah.
Or I
I
was
just copying it. We can try it right now. So we're going to see if we can't do it right now. So,
okay.
So you can introduce the clip, and then I'll try and deal with it.
Awesome. So we're trying something a bit different tonight. One of the apps that I love is called Pics Kids. It allows you to take an object and then have that object talk. So it sounds a little crazy, but we're going to let you hear some grade ones explain about the solid that they found in their classroom.
Yeah, and just by way of prefacing, what should work for those of you on computers is it should just play automatically. It's a short clip, only 11 seconds, this one. It should just play automatically in this front window. If it doesn't, I'm also going to put the link into the chat box. For those on mobile, you may have to click the link in the chat box.
I like to.
So really this is just a ploy so I can show you all the really cool, cute things that little kids say.
I'm dying. That was so funny. I'll shut off my mic now as I continue to laugh.
The best part was we didn't even have to prompt that. That was just what she did, and I had to airdrop myself the clip because it was just so awesome. So as you can see, they just went around the room looking for those solids, and were able to put a mouse on the character and then bring it to life. I think, Colin, what we'll do is we'll chat, and maybe we can just put the link to the how-to into the chat window instead of bringing it up. Does that sound okay?
That's the next one, the 2-minute one?
Yeah.
Okay,
so you can either listen to me or you can listen to the quick overview. If you just want to get a how-to on how Pics works, again, it's a nice, simple interface. As you can see in the picture, students take their picture, bring it in, you draw your mouth on, and there's a nice little next button, and then they record their voice. They can't record their voice, so they have a mouse, and then they're able to play it back. As you go along, though, they have a lot of these fancy little features here. So the kids, of course, loved dressing up their characters and exploring that way. So we'll give you a minute to check out the clip. Feel free to ask a question about Pics. So lots of possibilities when it comes to Pics. Great question, Dana. The videos will save automatically in the app, but what I love about both Shadow Puppet and Pics is they both will save videos to your camera roll. So you may be able to see it in the screen right here, up here on the screen. Over here in the bottom corner, there's a little export button, and your video will then save to your camera roll. In Shadow Puppet, the minute you say done, it will save in your camera roll as well. The reason we love apps that save to our camera roll is that apps that save to our camera roll will then, we can share them. So whether we put them into Seesaw, whether we put them, airdrop them to a class iPad, whether we put them on a Padlet page or a Google Classroom, there's lots of options. Yeah, going to Google Files, you got it, Dana. So we love those apps that go to our camera roll for that reason, and they both have that potential. I think when you look at Pics Kids, I can see students taking some of their creations. Last week I was in a kindergarten classroom, and one friend had made a symmetrical heart, and we had her talking about that. Another friend had created this parking garage for cars, and we had them bringing that parking garage to life and documenting it. So just a fun way to kind of capture that thinking, and within that thinking being able to articulate the math. Yeah, I like that for morning digital announcements. That's a great idea. Any questions or ideas about those? I love Araf's comment there for morning digital announcements. A great idea. So as we go through tonight, we wanted to start off with some of those simple, quick ideas, but we really wanted to continue to play with that idea again of how can we get to that increased dance, how can we bring digital tools together in play so that we can address some of those learning areas around mathematics. And I think the next area that I wanted to explore a little bit, or that I've been thinking about, is really the concept of a digital open material. I know we talk about it a lot in the early years when we talk about loose parts, or we look at materials that are open-ended, and what digital tools could we use that have that same essence, tools that could be used in a variety of ways. So there's kind of two that I've been exploring a bit more in detail, at least two that are affordable. If anybody has extra money and they're kind of exploring, Google Cubelets, they are absolutely amazing, but they make your bank account have a slight heart palpitation. One of the ones that I have been playing with a lot in the early years is the Osmo. Has anybody played with Osmo before? If you want to give us a thumbs up or let us know. Awesome. Marianne has tried it. Marianne, what's your favorite game? Your favorite tool with the Osmo? So I'll just, tangrams, awesome, perfect for the picture. Osmo was kind of an interesting experience for me. I picked it up actually as a little bit of my own inquiry. I wanted to see how students would respond. And I was a little worried that it would feel more prescriptive, like a detailed task or a worksheet would feel. So I thought I'd have to try it with some friends. And I think the biggest benefit that I found with the Osmo is the fact that you can have a variety of students together, coming together and exploring. And to me, that's where the richness is really in the dialogue. So the friends you see on the screen are actually the first class I ever tried it with. We brought the Tangram game out. And when I first saw it, I thought, really, is this any different than us doing those activities before on puzzle sheets? Not sure if it had any real benefit. So if you can see here on the screen, the Osmo is a kit. You can get it at lots of different locations. It's actually on Best Buy and Chapters STEM games. I wish I came up with the idea. It really is just a stand here you see on the bottom and a little contraption that goes on the top of your iPad that then reflects down and will read what happens on the bottom. What's awesome is these here are actually wooden tangrams, so physical, tangible objects they can feel. And on the screen they would get a challenge, kind of like what you see over here, and then they have to match it on the bottom. And they get immediate feedback if they put it in the right spot or if they could change it up. And again, as I was saying, I was worried, but as we were chatting, it was amazing just to see the dialogue and the conversation that happened through the group. The back and forth, looking at which shape belonged where, and just that mathematical conversation that came up. I remember with another class watching a student that held the shape up to the screen, flipped it so it matched, and then brought it back down to the table. And that whole concept of spatial sense and how things work in the environment was just amazing to observe. Colin, if you don't mind, if we can show the coding option. Yeah, it can, you're right, Marianne, sometimes it can be a little funky. That's why you also see we used a piece of paper underneath. I found if it's on a textured or a patterned surface, it doesn't always work as well. But another game you can get is actually the coding game, and we're going to watch some friends just explore for a few seconds.
So hopefully it works. I'll also put it into the chat box here just in a second.
I don't know why I didn't record more of it, but it was just awesome. The coding app is another game you can play, and with the coding, it actually brings physical bricks in. As you could see in the clip, it was just awesome to see that conversation naturally happen of students using bricks and having to use those number bricks, having to bring in a loop, having to kind of troubleshoot, and having a variety of options to work through. But lots of cool pieces there. Thanks for reminding us, Trish, that sometimes school boards will have them in their lending library, which is just an awesome opportunity. So one of those other open materials that I love is called Dash. Anybody tried Dash yet? That's at our Peel lending library as well. So Dash is a cute little robot you see. There's lots of robot options. There's Sphero if your schools or boards have access to Sphero. Some people have been exploring a little tiny robot called Ozobot where you can follow. Candace has tried it. That's awesome. And it looks like a few folks have used the Bebot, which are awesome tools. Again, I think I love them because they do have that possibility to just be part of our play environment. So when I first got the option to try Dash out probably 2.5 years ago now, the first time I ever brought it into a kindergarten classroom, we actually just started playing with the physical setup of the room. So one of the awesome pieces about Dash is that it comes with 3 different apps. So similar to the Sphero with the drive and draw, you can really start with problem solving right away, but problem solving with the physical environment instead of having to use code to control them. Dash then has a next app, which is called Pass, where you can kind of lead kids up to coding, and another chance for us to explore shapes. We've actually, in some classrooms, just stuck a marker to the back of them. I know Aviva did this, Aviva Dunsinger in Halton as well. And I saw these fancy Lego contraptions, but we just taped it to the back of them. We taped a marker to the back of them, put them on some paper, and then with the Pass app, we're drawing shapes and trying to get Dash to make the shape that we were looking for. I think what I love about Dash is just that there's so many possibilities for that rich conversation. Before the holidays, I had the opportunity with a teacher librarian colleague to look at Dash and coding around shapes. So as you can see, she just had designed a few shapes on the hundreds carpet. We were hoping that they would come into the idea of measurement and using the blocks on the hundreds carpet, and some kids went there, some kids didn't. It was interesting to even just see which kids went to using the properties of the shape to help them with their code. So some kids got into that idea, if it's a rectangle and there's 2 sides that are both the same size, we don't really need to count both times, which was really awesome to see. Sorry, yeah, the hundreds carpet is just this fancy, it was used to called the learning carpet. I know in Peel, we probably got them, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, in all our classrooms. Really, it's just a hundreds grid, so anything with a grid would be awesome. I'm sure you could do it without a grid either, as well. But yeah, just seeing that conversation and that dialogue that comes as students are trying to problem solve together. But what I love is that sometimes it's in obvious math conversations like we see in the picture in front of us, but sometimes it's a bit more indirect in just that open-ended play. So we have a video for you, hopefully it works, of just a few seconds, and I'll talk about it after you watch the clip.
Okay, so here we go again. So the same idea. It's about 20 seconds. I'll play it in the center screen, and I'll also put it into the chat box here. So here we go.
It's just amazing to kind of see where kids go with the explorations. In the video, you watch some kindergarten friends. It was kind of a journey we went on, and there was a few friends that were ready for that challenge. And as we looked at coding through the obstacle course, it was when the app and the tool just first came out, so now they have these nice dials, but at the time the kids actually had to use 180 or 360 degrees and actually type in the degrees. And just seeing that back and forth between them as they were trying to troubleshoot. We had these kindergarten kids that pretty much wrote 18 lines of code to get their robots through the obstacle course they designed. And as they were coding, playing with those number concepts, problem solving to try to figure out a better idea. And a lot of those number talks and those conversations we talk about really come to life when we're exploring and playing in that experience. We even just did it recently with some grade 5s, and I got schooled by this kid in his mathematical thinking because he could justify all of his answers. Those are moments where we would jump up and down for joy if they just automatically justified their thinking. And I think when we look at a lot of the digital tools, especially something like the robot, and in that collaborative, playful experience, they want to justify their thinking. They want to explore. They want to have that growth mindset. And when things don't go well, they want to try something different. So it really, to me, fit that open idea of exploration that we wanted to see. Maybe we'll just take a second to see if anybody has any questions or ideas. Could you see it working in your program? Did you have similar experiences with the Lego redos or the Bebots or the Spheros that you've been using? What have you found that has worked well? Feel free to add any ideas to the chat box. If you like Dash or Dot, you can always give us a and questions are always welcome as well. Karen, you're finding the same thing with the Lego Redo, eh? I think Lego Redo has really brought the Lego robotics to the primary years. I think it's made it a lot more accessible than something like the EVEs that we've had in the past. And I've just seen so much amazing problem solving as kids are kind of building and coding together. To steal your words there, Karen. I don't know if I have an answer for you, Raf. Wendy, I haven't heard of the Lego Boost products, but maybe somebody that has can add that into the chat box. Raf, I think part of the hard part is that sorting through that collection. I know with some primary colleagues, especially as we're looking at tools like Seesaw, we've just tried to figure out habits, I guess, to kind of sort through all of those resources. So if it is looking at some of the video clips, choosing one or two that we want to highlight and include instead of including them all, or kind of highlighting the ones that we want to really focus in on. So with some folks and Seesaw, we've talked about actually having a separate folder for some of their key pieces that they want to bring up to parents or to the report. It definitely isn't an easy thing to tackle, just because it's so easy to capture those pictures. One of the pieces, and I'll see if I can pull it up, one of the pieces I'd like to explore a little bit more, and I was talking to a colleague actually over the weekend about our session tonight, and we were talking about that idea of pedagogical documentation as students are exploring some of these tools so that it becomes more of a documentation of our experience. And I've just dropped the link in there. She had a really great resource she pointed me to around drawing out their interpretation of Ring Around the Rosie. And we were just chatting about the idea of how could you document in the same way with something like Dash or the Osmo. And that may present a different way for collecting those pieces so it doesn't become odds and ends, but really more of a collection. I am a terrible person to ask, Raf, because I don't delete any photos. I think I have about 1,300 on my iPhone or my iCloud account right now. I would say just for space-wise, you can't keep them all. If you do want to do something like somebody mentioned earlier about the Google Drive, Google Photos option, Google Photos would allow you to store them all away if you sync them all, and then just keeping in your documentation collection the ones you like the most. That may give you the benefit of both, being able to go back if you really wanted to look back, but knowing that what's in your Google folder or in your Seesaw account is really something a bit more curated and focused. I think the pure fact that Seesaw and similar tools like Sesame and other tools really allow you to not just take the picture, but add your documentation piece alongside it. A lot of times, I always say to people, I take a picture, and I actually found pictures from my grade 1 class that I had to do the old school way before iPhones and iPads. And I just took random pictures and I had them side by side, but I didn't have any of that richness in the conversation. So I think an app like Seesaw or Sesame, I know some of us, like in Peel, we also have the Peel assessment app. And I know different boards support different tools, so always check with your district. But those tools that allow us to take that picture and then that documentation, whether it's in a voice clip, whether it's text, whether it's even just being able to doodle and highlight a section, I think they force us to be a little more critical of the pictures that we put into our collection. I love Seesaw. I think it's a great tool. I'm also partial to Sesame. I knew the guys when they first started. But I know there's hundreds of great tools, and the hardest part with assessment, OneNote is fantastic. The hardest part with assessment tools is we all assess differently. So you're definitely going to have to look at them critically and look at the tool that really fits your style and your rhythm. And Wendy has a great point about privacy concerns. I've looked at the terms of agreement about Seesaw because I know that's come up a few times. To me, Seesaw looks similar terms of agreement to any other online tool we would see. You own the pictures, but of course there's always those pieces that they could change their terms of agreement at any time. I would always make sure that you abide by your board's media guidelines. So for us in Peel, we have a media guideline that says we'll be using pictures for assessment. So with that signed off, we have consent. The other thing is I'd stay away from too much identifying information. There's no need to use full names in Seesaw, first and last name. Limiting some of those pieces. I wouldn't be putting any sensitive information in, but it's not necessarily where I would keep track of students. Let's say a student that's really struggling with self-regulation. I probably would use a different tool to do that documentation. Hopefully we answered your questions. There's so many great points as we were having that conversation. So if we're okay, we probably have a few other pieces we want to show you, if that's all right. Thank you guys for that awesome conversation. So keeping on that bit around documentation, around play, around that increased stance, as I was re-looking at some of the documents, whether it was the kindergarten program document, but also the How Learning Happens document that looks at really all the years of education, but focuses specifically on the early years. And before that, one of the things that really came to mind as I was reading these quotes and as I was having a conversation around play, math, and digital tools was just how much of that conversation, that natural exploration of mathematics comes into play when we get into coding. And just that need and that want for apps that are open-ended. And it was kind of funny at the time that I was doing a lot of this exploration, I actually stumbled upon an article by Mitch Resnick. Now, if you've heard his name before, he's actually the director of the Lifelong Kindergarten Lab. It's where all the coolest, funkiest things have been created. So from Lego robotics to Scratch to Mickey Makeys, if anybody's seen those, they actually all have come out of this lifelong kindergarten lab. And Mitch Resnick was actually one of the creators of Scratch, and he had a big part in Scratch Junior that we'll look at in a minute. But he had a great kind of concept about apps that I think comes into our conversation when we look at play in the early years and digital tools. And he said apps really should have low floors, high ceilings, and wide walls. So what he meant by that is that when we look at low floors, we want an easy entry level. So when we look at apps like Pics, there's not a lot of steps involved for students to really dive in and get started with the tool. We want high ceilings. We want apps that really have a lot of potential for growth. So we don't necessarily want to invest a lot of time in apps that don't give us multiple opportunities because you're kind of going to get stuck, or we're going to limit kids to what the possibilities are. And that idea has kind of been presented before, but he had an interesting concept when he talked about wide walls. And with wide walls, he was saying, we want apps that can be used in a variety of ways. So when I look at something like Scratch, I can be using it to do some storytelling. I could bring my science to life. Online, I can create artwork, or I can create music. And really that there's that variety of different ways we can use it. So as we went through tonight, we really tried to find tools that had those low floors, high ceilings, and wide walls. And as I thought of that quote that we just saw, and that conversation with Mitch Resnick, there's no greater app that fits that than Scratch Junior. And Beatrice, I love that you love Scratch Junior. That is awesome. Scratch Junior is actually was released probably about 1.5 years ago. Scratch Junior is an open-ended coding platform. So where some folks have tried code.org, or I know some folks also talked about Codable, which is awesome. Codable is more set games that students have to work through. Scratch Junior is really just students choosing those commands and putting them together however they like. So when we look at Scratch, we've really explored it in different ways. Sometimes it's a bit more guided, and I didn't pull this link out, so I'll try to grab it really quick. I had a colleague in kindergarten actually start her kids off with Scratch Junior by just posting one of their challenge cards online. So Scratch, here. I'm just going to put it into the box there. It's just in the chat window if you want to check them out. So on their website, Scratch actually has 9 different challenge cards that use limited text to walk students through those challenges. And on the next slide, I'll kind of show you. Here's a friend, and it's kind of interesting to watch because some friends, they don't like having those challenges whatsoever. They want that free exploration. And then I found other friends really enjoyed having those kind of steps to follow. And my friend here was one of them, and last week we were doing it with another friend. And they really enjoyed having those steps to follow and to do that reading and that exploration on their own. Other friends just like that free exploration. So one of my colleagues, she just put out the challenge card and put out some iPads and asked the kids to kind of figure it out, which is awesome. With some other classes, we've done it as a group. One of the things you see here is a grade 1 activity we did last year. We were exploring community and mapping, positional language. It was an inquiry they were exploring in class. So we actually did it over several days where we went in and had students design a map of their community. It was kind of funny at the time. They were obsessed with GPSs. It's all that came up in every conversation we were having. So we decided we would make Scratch move like a GPS through his community. So he went to different locations and let us know. But the conversation that comes into play when we're using those code blocks. Traditionally, a lot of code, block coding is what we see in a lot of elementary classrooms, even middle school classrooms. But Scratch really simplifies it even further by using no text, so it really is just those symbols. And here, and in the video you're going to see in a minute, you're going to see a lot of blue code blocks, but we also have a lot of other tools we can use in that exploration as well. To me, what was awesome was just even when we did the walkthrough as a class, there's an option here to bring in the grid, and we had probably about a 10-minute conversation about how we could use the code we had already created and the steps that he would need to take to get across the page, and use that measurement and that understanding to predict how many steps he would need to take to move up our page. And it really, again, reiterated to me just that power of having that open-ended play when we come into our math explorations, and how those math conversations naturally just evolve. So we have 2 video clips for you. If Colin's okay with it, we'll, I think we'll show the first clip full screen again. It's just, you can kind of see one of those examples, and then we'll put the how-to into, I guess we could just do the how-to on the screen too if you want. Colin, does that sound okay?
Yeah, that's fine. We can do both of them if you'd like, so just give me a second. I'm just copying and pasting other things here. Just gonna copy it. All right, so you want to do them both in the screen. I'll also put them in the chat box so people can have them for later if they'd like. But here goes the first one.
So obviously you can tell the video's not edited as we left in that opening bit. But it's crazy how even just a simple little piece like that took the students several steps to kind of get to that point and work through the mathematics. The other piece was just being able to see the problem solving that came into play and students using their past experience to come in. So we were talking about a piece of code one day, and one of the students just looked over to his friend and said, well, I know what to do because I did this last time. And those conversations just, they make you have goosebumps. But we have a little clip that just gives you a quick overview of Scratch Junior, and we'll touch base right after it.
Okay, here we go again.
I don't know. Can other people hear the clip?
Yeah, mine seems to have frozen as well.
That's okay. We can go back.
Actually, they can click on the link in the chat box and pop it into another browser window. I'm not sure why it froze.
No worries. That's okay. So if you want to, there's a, oh, you can hear us talking. That's a good thing. So if you click on the link in the chat box, you can watch the clip. I've just tried to show you just how simple it is to get started with the code, as well as where that grid option is. And a really cool tool called Loop Tool, which is something we use a lot in code, and just how that could kind of come into that conversation as well. We'll give you a minute or two, and then we'll take it from there. Yeah, Rebecca, we just took it off the slides because it kind of seemed to stall. Do you hear it on your own computer, or is it you hear it in the background?
Yeah, Rebecca, it might be playing in another browser window that you've got open on your computer because we've stopped it here unless something strange is happening.
So with Scratch, like we said, lots of possibility. Okay, it stopped. That's awesome. As long as you don't have any ghost sounds there, Rebecca. lots of possibilities when it comes to Scratch. In these situations, we were bringing some of that math in. In this situation, the grade 1 teacher had already brought in that positional language. Like I said, some of it is just that bringing in that numeracy in those playful experiences. So when we did it last week with some kindergarten friends, it just naturally came up in our conversations as we were trying to get Scratch to do a specific thing. But we've also seen some more direct links to math. Sometimes it's been using some of those understanding of shapes and creating our own touch tap games within Scratch Junior. Even creating a little question and response type of game. There's lots of possibilities. Again, that high ceiling we talked about before with Mitch Resnick and those wide walls. So we just want to pause for a second and see if you do have any questions or ideas. And if not, we'll move on to our last kind of exploration as we move into the last little bit of our time together. So I have two more tools that I wanted to share. And I think as we look through, we started with some of those quick tools for capturing or documenting that play with Shadow Puppet and Pics. We looked at some of those open materials with things like Osmo and Dash, looking at those apps that have low floors, high ceilings, and wide walls like Scratch Junior. But sometimes I think there's a lot of potential in just engaging students in creating their own games. And there's kind of two go-to tools that I use. These are definitely not unique for the early years, but definitely two tools we have used in early years classrooms. Has anybody, and again, if you want to use that thumbs up or want to let us know in the chat window, anybody use SketchNation? It used to be called SketchNation Studio. They've actually updated it to SketchNation Create or TinyTap. So SketchNation Create is a quick tool that actually allows you to design your own games. SketchNation Create allows you to design your characters, your settings, and your backgrounds, and literally push play, and you start it and you play your games. TinyTap is a little bit more intense. TinyTap allows you to create a variety of different activities, and then allows you to share those games. So maybe we'll take a look at SketchNation Create first, if that's okay, and I can just share a couple ideas as we drop the link into the chat window. So if you want to click on the link and take a look, we tried to do a quick little overview of SketchNation Create. One of the cautions with SketchNation is there is a lot of reading. And SketchNation Create, and one of my friends, Noah, in kindergarten, he probably taught me the biggest lesson. I was a little skeptical with SketchNation just because of the amount of text. And I went into this classroom one day, and it was a colleague that I actually taught with earlier, so I had known her for several years, which gives you that nice trusting relationship where you can take some risks that we don't always take. And I went to her and I said, I'm not sure this is going to work, but why don't we try it out? So we took a few friends that we thought were ready for the challenge, and we walked them through creating a game. For them, we were actually looking at some of the concepts they were exploring in math and getting them to use them in their designs. So they were using a shape to help them create their character and bringing in some of the work they were doing with patterns as they created their game. And I was surprised because even though there was a lot of text, these kids kind of went with the flow. But again, we had that small group support, so I wasn't sure if they would do it again or if it stuck. And it was just awesome. As I went back, I think it was probably 2 months later, I'm hanging out in the classroom. We were about to check something else out. And as I looked down, I noticed a kid I didn't work with working on SketchNation Create. So I asked the question, so how did you learn how to use the app? And the kid looked up at me and he said, Noah taught me. So this one friend in the class had taken it upon himself to then take the app that we explored that I thought was way too tricky and ended up teaching the whole class how to use it when they went and asked him. And I think to me that really challenged me to think outside the box. It also challenged me to realize that when we look at digital tools, and I think we see this in play all the time in the early years, but when we look at digital tools, often there's going to be some students that are really drawn to it and others that aren't ready for the challenge yet. So that idea of everybody always doing the same thing, it doesn't necessarily always work, but also that sometimes we don't need to be the ones that bring that game or that tool to the whole class. We've done that with Scratch Junior before, where we start with a small group and then we let them kind of trickle it down to the rest of the class. So definitely a lesson that I learned. So Colin's dropped the YouTube clip in there if you want to take a quick look at it. In addition, just like we saw with Scratch Junior, sometimes I think that math and that problem solving comes out in specific learning goals that we have in place, and sometimes it's just a natural product of that problem solving. So even when we created games about our local community, looking at proportional reasoning, when we looked at designing their characters to their obstacles and their backgrounds. With some of the older primary grades, we looked at probability. Sketch Nation Create lets you start with a simple mode, but also lets you go into advanced mode, where you can really control character frequency, the size of the character, and their interactions. We even had a class create their own food chain games in Sketch Nation Create. So definitely have that high ceiling piece. The cool question, Dana. So one of the pieces is almost all the apps. I'm just trying to do a little quick check in my head. All the apps we've talked about tonight are free. So Sketch Nation, TinyTap, Scratch Junior, Shadow Puppet, Pics, as well as the 3 apps at the very beginning, Frantic Find, Moves, Math, and Clarity Innovations. And those 3 apps actually, each of those companies has several apps that you could get for free. So they're tools that I use in a lot of my schools just because I know money is always limited. The Osmo I did by myself just because at the time we hadn't explored it yet, and I was just curious to see how students would respond. The Osmo ranges from about 100 to 200 if you buy the fancier pack. A lot of my schools have bought it for a grade team. Again, because it's easily transportable, we could kind of do that. Dash was actually purchased through our early years because we were trying to explore the possibilities. But our board has gone and actually ended up purchasing, our library, sorry, I shouldn't say our board. Our library has purchased a set that folks can book out from the professional library, which has been an awesome option for some of our early years. I know a colleague, Jay Wigmore, recently had them in and they were exploring them in grade 2. So that made it much more accessible. Some schools have been able to afford one or a collection. They're becoming a lot more affordable. Dash right now I think is around $150. But something like an Ozobot's only $60. I don't know if anybody's seen the Codapillar. Codapillar is probably about, I think the Codapillar from Fisher-Price is about $70. So a bit more accessible to a school that wanted to tackle it. I know, money's always the hard part, right? You see a lot of these cool tools and then the money piece kind of holds us back. Sketch Nation Create is available both on Apple, but also available on the web, just like we saw with Clarity Innovations. So Sketch Nation Create is one of my go-tos. TinyTap was kind of a second kind of piece I ended up stumbling upon. To be honest, when I first saw it, it was a lot of pre-made games, and I just didn't see what things that spoke to me. And I was at one of the Apple conferences, hanging out with a friend, or a new friend at the time, from Brazil, and she was mentioning how she used TinyTap with her early years, pretty much to teach parents how to read. So she was doing a free education program within a private system, and her students often have parents that were illiterate at the time, and students were helping their parents learn how to read through the games they were creating. So it was one of those moments when I realized maybe I overjudged the tool and that I needed to take a second look. And we've been looking at it a lot, especially when it comes to English language learners and looking at supporting students in that language development. It allows you to create a variety of different types of puzzles and interactive activities. It almost feels like it mimics some of the materials you would have been able to do on a smartboard. The other thing, though, is it allows you to create your own stories. So you really can create your own story with a game at the end. So a lot of opportunities for some shared publishing. Similar to Sketch Nation Create, I find for some of our friends that are ready, they're up for the challenge. I often would start with something like an I Spy activity. In grade 1 and grade 2, though, we've used it in many different ways. So we have a grade 2 example that we thought maybe you would enjoy. And we'll let you, I'm going to put the link to TinyTap right under Colin's video there. And we'll just give you a few seconds, a few minutes. I don't know why I keep saying seconds. Sorry, folks. We'll give you a few minutes to look at the TinyTap game and explore that. And then if you want to take a few minutes to watch the video and see how that's done, and we'll take those questions and those ideas that you have. So we'll give you a few minutes there. So if you made it to about page 3 of the TinyTap link there, you would have heard one of our very energetic friends sharing her skip counting question. It's one of my favorite parts of that story. So hopefully you had a chance to take a look. For those that can't see the links or didn't get a chance, TinyTap really has a lot of options for you to either draw, bring in pictures, bring in objects from their clip art bank. That's kind of how they get the money, is if you want to create a private account or if you want to buy some of the pre-made materials that are available in the program. And then each page would have a activity attached to it. So activity-wise, you can either have just say something, which would be more like a storybook. You can have ask a question, which is what we've used for those I Spy activities. So in the video, you may have just seen even just using those shapes and some of that mathematical language as we're exploring. You also have the option of doing a shape puzzle. So that's what you would have seen in the skip counting book, where we had in the skip counting book, we had a couple questions that were those ask question type questions. You circled the right answer. With the shape puzzles, we've used that a lot with patterning, with putting ideas, sequencing. And then there's a couple other options that I find I haven't explored quite as much just yet, but lots of possibilities there. So I think I'm just checking in on the time. Are there any questions that we had about the Sketch Nation Create and the TinyTap? Or you feel okay with those? And of course, those videos will be there for you later. I know it's a fast-paced webinar, so we want to make sure those resources are there for you to check out and explore at a later time. And each of the YouTube videos has a link to either the App Store or to their website so that you can dig a little deeper there as well. So as we come towards the end of our night, we just want to come back to that conversation around where is the math. And I think this is the one thing that I've really been tackling, especially as we look at something like code. And that really, there's two ways we can have that conversation when we look at the math. It reminded me when the full day program first came out of that kindergarten continuum, where we talked about at one end having that very laissez-faire approach, and on the other the didactic, and we wanted to be in the middle where we had either the child-initiated play or that playful experiences. And I see a lot of the same pieces when we talk about Maker Ed or when we talk about coding, in that we can have those experiences where we're naming the mathematics for our learners. So in that free exploration with coding, or whether it's in documenting their play experiences with Pics, we can name that mathematics that we see, or we can ask those prompting questions to kind of support them. And then on the other hand, we can also create experiences that link to specific learning goals within math. But just coming back to that naming, sometimes it can be a little tricky. And just, I know you guys probably know all those verbs from the top of your head, but I'm just going to put in the chat box, I just linked to specific sections of both the kindergarten as well as the grade 1 and 2 curriculum. Feel free to always to use your own ideas there. But as you look through, whether it's looking through the overview page of the grade 1 math curriculum, or if it's looking at the processes, the math processes page in grade 2, or if it's looking at the problem solving and innovation section of the kindergarten document, what are some of the verbs that really stood out to you as we were exploring? I know the one that stood out while I was looking at it recently, even just this morning, was that idea of, especially when we look at the math processes, of coming up with different solutions. I'm going to come up with my better verb there. That wasn't a very good explanation. Sorry, folks. But as we look at the most math processes, that idea of reflecting and monitoring their thinking and their learning and going back and adjusting, that was something that really stood out to me as I was looking at the document. When we came to the kindergarten program document, there was a lot of ideas around math in authentic play, and some of those verbs around communicating and problem solving that stood out. So if you have any of those verbs, I want to drop them on the page. I know we're a little short on time, so we'll take a minute or two if you want to reflect on that, and then we'll come into our closing piece.
So, Tina, I'm not sure if you're talking or not. Your microphone's not on. Yeah, thanks, Allison. I just noticed the same things. I thought we were having some time to put onto the board there, and then we switched slides. No, that's okay. You had the same problem happen that happened to me, I guess. Yes, you switched the slides. I think your microphone clipped out on you, so it's all good.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I was just looking at the time, but you guys can keep adding words if you like too. Sorry about that, rushing people on. I was just saying a nice little piece to look at just to help with that reflection and the verbs was there's a nice little collection of questions to keep in mind when you're working on that increase dance in mathematics. And as I looked at the questions, I could see them linking into all the apps we explored tonight. So here's kind of the trickier question, and we'll come back to those question and ideas. But when we do these sessions, we talk about lots of tools. And I know it can be overwhelming at times because it just seems like a really long list. So my one tip is always to choose one thing that you will start with. So whether it's this week or this month, what do you think is going to be the one thing that you want to tackle or try with your learners, or maybe it's even just with a small group, or maybe there's an idea that you think will challenge that learner in your classroom. Some of the reasons we got into SketchNation Create in classes was I remember some colleagues just wanting to engage a big group of boys they had that they were struggling with. So we brought in SketchNation Create to kind of bring in that challenge and to link to some of their passions and interests. So I see shadow puppets on the list. That's cool. And chatter pics. Awesome. Tiny taps for someone as well. Hey, Colin, you'll have to let us know how it goes with your son. I'd start with chatter pics for sure. The funny story with chatter pics is I actually was hanging out with my friend and she has 2 daughters and 2 sons, and the girls decided to make their 4-month-old brother sing a song. So it's priceless. A fun one to pull out at parties even.
Sounds awesome. I'm just envisioning like Stuffies and all this Paw Patrol stuff having going on adventures, and I think it'll be really cool for them.
That's going to be awesome. You'll have to send us the links. Brass, definitely check and see where you can get some lending places where they know where to get those materials. That's awesome. See some Moose Math and some Osmo and some SketchNation. Feel free to put a little sticker beside an idea that you enjoy as well. And I know it is one of those hard parts with technology. It's always about expanding our own comfort zone when it comes to tech. I know I can get overwhelmed too sometimes that there's just so much out there. Looking at different tools, and sometimes it's using a tool in a different way. Maybe there was an idea tonight that was different that you could add to your toolbox and take it from there. I'm seeing a lot of chatter pics, which is awesome. So one thing maybe that we'll do, Colin, is we'll add the shadow puppet overview. We did a shadow puppet clip for the session in the fall, so we can add that to the YouTube playlist just in case you want a little quick how-to bit on that.
Also, it's not in the playlist now. I'm just starting to look here. So you're going to add it. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I'll add it in. I didn't make a clip tonight because we had it from the last session. Sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just trying to follow your thinking. That's good. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us tonight. I hope that you feel like you take away a new tool or a new idea, a new exploration perhaps. Feel free to connect at any time. If it's okay, we're going to just switch the slide here. So feel free to connect, whether it's through email. I think I'm on every social media platform out there except for Snapchat. I'm not that cool. So feel free to connect with me on Twitter, Instagram, or Pinterest if you like. But yeah, always willing to connect and keep the conversation going. But if you have any questions or ideas, let us know. And if not, it was so awesome to be learning with you tonight.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much, Gene. I'm gonna zip over to the little icons here and give you a little applause there. Feel free to join me, everybody, in doing that. It was really, really cool. Lots of really great stuff. Just to kind of wrap up, I know we're just about to 9 o'clock here. Oh, you have some other stuff. Oh, all the fonts. Oh, I'm going to look at all those later. That's good, all your presentation stuff. So thanks again, Tina, on behalf of OTF and everybody who was here tonight. It was a full house. This was one of the bigger ones that I've moderated. So there was, at one point, there was almost 50 people in the room. So it was very cool to see. If you've done this before, you know the drill with this. We always ask you to fill out the feedback survey. It comes back to OTF and it goes to Tina as well. So it gives her some feedback on her presentation and how you found it valuable. When you log out of Blackboard, you will automatically be sent to the feedback survey, but I've placed it here as a link as well. And when you are done the survey, you will get a link to fill out a certificate of sort of participation or learning that you can add to a portfolio. And I have a link, but I can't. Uh-oh, my Google Mail has frozen on me here. I'll put a link in the chat box here in a minute for the survey. If you did not, here we go. If it doesn't work for you somehow and you wanted to just go straight to not to the link, to the certification rather, which is right here. So as I said, when you log out, you will get automatically pop up in your browser to fill out that feedback survey. So we would appreciate it very much if you did that. And then once you've done that, you'll get a option to print a survey. Just to sort of look at what's going on, we've got a few things that have already happened in January and a few things coming up. You can see there's some neat stuff coming along in thinking and using Google Sites in the next couple of weeks. And then through February, all kinds of different things for all kinds of different types of learning. So feel free to join for any of those. Check the OTF calendar on a regular basis because stuff is always added as they come up. They're always lots of fun. And then next thing is if you don't know, OTF also gets funding through Ministry of Education for people who want to complete AQ courses. So if you got all interested in mathematics and technology this evening, you can go and take an AQ course in math, and OTF can help offset some of that cost for you. So again, on the OTF website, all that information is there for you. And then last of all, as you connected with Tina on social media everywhere, you can also connect with OTF and just keep up to date on what's going on in the whole happenings. So thanks again very much, everybody, and thanks again, Tina. It was a wonderful session. Appreciate the energy. It was a very lively group, and so it was a lot of fun. So I'm going to stop the recording, and then any last questions can be asked once we get offline here or off the recording.